Hello, and welcome to Chaotic Creatives, the show about embracing the chaos that comes from living a creative life.
We are your hosts, two self-proclaimed chaotic creative gals. I'm Rachael Renee. I'm your internet hype gal. I'm a creativity coach here to help you live a big, juicy life.
Hell yeah. And I am Lauren Hom. Some of you might know me better as Hom Sweet Hom all over the internet. I am a letterer, designer, muralist, and most recently, chef.
Yay. This is our last episode.
Ah, we made it. You made it.
Of season 2. We'll be back for season 3, obviously. I've requested, though, that we go back to chairs for season 3.
This workbench was cute, but, we have to reassess and prioritize our
We're
lower
middle-aged now. So,
yeah,
we both had birthdays during season 2. So now it's time to care for our aged bodies.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We are excited though today to talk about creative challenges. You've heard us talk about containers. And we thought it might be good to end this season with some actionable, inspiration for creative challenges.
Yeah, since we'll be leaving you for a bit to take our season break, we thought this might be a good time to give you some strategies to create your own briefs, challenges, so you can actually focus on the things you want to do. Before we started recording, I told Rachael that I think the thesis of this podcast is help, my eyes are bigger than my stomach when it comes to all the creative things I want to do with my finite amount of time and energy in life. How do I spend more time doing the creative stuff and less time thinking about how to do the creative stuff?
Yes.
And one of those ways that I found to be the most effective, you've seen me do it, you've seen Rachael do it, is to come up with your own project or challenge. And I always refer to this as creating your own brief, where you are the client and the creative director, where you get to decide the parameters that you're going to work within for this specific project. And you also get to approve everything right out of the gate. And that is the benefit of doing your own personal work. And instead of just sitting down to a blank page, because we all know how scary that can be and not knowing what to make, when you have a challenge or a project that you've set for yourself, when you sit down, it gives you an instant focus of okay, I said I was going to draw every single one of the letters of the alphabet, right? For the next 26 days, one letter a day. And that just gives you a container to start and to actually practice the skills that you say you want to get better at.
Yeah. And I think, at least for me, as a chaotic creative, being able to, like you said, refer back to that, those are the guardrails. I you use a lot of great terminology that I co-opt for myself. Guardrails are a great one because it's kind of you can still work within the guardrails or the container, but having those boundaries is helpful to make progress. Thinking about it like a go-kart or a bumper car, right? You want to go through this winding path and get to the ultimate goal of bettering your creative skill or, finding your style or whatever it is. And you have to kind of bounce off the walls to figure out how to get there. It's a winding, messy path. But if you can create those guardrails for yourself, it helps you get there faster.
Yeah, you're just corralling yourself, basically. And there's a time where having parameters can feel restricting, if they're too narrow, or if they're parameters that you yourself didn't set, that someone else set for you. You might start to feel resentful of that.
Ooh, but I always do.
In this case, and I think a lot of creatives have that, right? A little bit of anti-authority, just kind of I'm going to do it my own way.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really beautiful character trait that creative people have. And the limitlessness of creativity can be overwhelming sometimes because for anyone who's done any kind of creative freelance work, if you've ever been given a brief by a client where they're we love everything you do whatever you want, that turns out poorly 95% of the time because setting a brief just sets intentions. It sets some goals for where we're trying to go. Are we going in the same direction? And on your own with a brief or a challenge, you can do that for yourself where you feel a little less chaotic. You have some parameters where you can express your creativity, but you're giving yourself guardrails to focus. And then by the end of your challenge, you will have this body of work or this nice little package that you've created where you're like, oh, I did that. I can see my progress. Like, it's almost like I've always considered personal projects or challenges. At the end, you look away and you're like, I curated a little mini gallery show.
Yes.
And curation really matters, especially in this day and age. The last episode, we just talked about why social media feels so overwhelming because there's very few parameters. And I think that with this, it's like, okay, niche for now, right? Focus for now.
Yep.
What is something that I've been talking about, like saying that I want to do or want to work on that I just haven't been able to? Breaking it up into little bite-sized pieces in the form of a challenge or a passion project is a great way to just take a step there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you need to think about, and what we'll do at the second half of the episode is kind of like rapid fire.
Yes.
Hit each other with potential skills or prompts, and then the other one will have to come up with
to set you up with
challenge.
some examples of what a challenge could look like, big or small, because you can really tailor this to how much bandwidth you have right now. If you're going through a slower season where you have lots of time, then you might want to do a meteor challenge. If you are really busy and you only have an hour on the weekends, then a little bite-sized challenge. You want to tailor your challenge to your actual available time so you don't end up in this spiral of like, well, I can't do the thing that I want to do. And then you're setting yourself up for disappointment by setting the bar so high.
Yep. I think it might have been in the last season, but I tried to do Creative Play for May challenge. And
the portrait thing?
Yes, for myself, because I wanted to get better at drawing self-portraits. And I love this idea of having a collection of self-portraits. Oh no, I didn't. It wasn't just drawing. It was like any medium. But I personally wanted to get better at drawing with different colored pencils. And I got like 3 days into the challenge and I was like, I hate this. But the challenge is also, if you set yourself up and you're like, okay, I want to draw self-portraits, I want to use this medium, I want to improve this technical skill. If you're really digging your heels in when you set this challenge for yourself and you don't want to do it, it's one, it's okay. And two, maybe you're just attracted to that as art to consume and not to make.
And you don't know until you test it out.
Yeah.
That
feels... that was a big light bulb moment for me.
Ooh, and I'm glad you figured that out. I think we can approach this from, you've done your style challenge on Instagram, which is like a daily outfit prompt, right?
Sorry,
for a month.
My skirt is really loud.
Real crunchy.
Yeah.
And I've done like my own version of a challenge, which is, I have two ways I've done it. I've done a creative challenge that actually was an email prompt that I would send out of like, here's the brief for the week. We're going to make this thing.
Wow, that was a long-standing thing.
Such a long thing. And also just such a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I've also done it in my own like design career, coming up with my own projects for myself, like passion projects, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this skill and this is going to be the topic. And I'm going to create a small body of work around this one tight topic. So I have a portfolio piece at the very end of the day. That I can put in my portfolio to show a client that I can execute chalkboard lettering across 10 different chalkboards or something versus just like one-off pieces, which are fine. They're well and good to do one-off pieces to explore, to experiment. I have some sitting on my desk right now. I was playing with acrylic inks this weekend and didn't really have a goal. But I was telling Kristle that—
But that's play.
Yeah.
That's prioritizing play and figuring out, do I even like this?
Yes.
If you set a challenge for yourself where I'm going to paint tomatoes every day, you know, it could have been like, oh, I actually hate this. And then you can internalize that. At least I know I did for a while, like, oh my gosh, I can draw. I should do this more. It's like, no, I don't actually enjoy this.
Yeah, I think one-off, like, you know, just playing around in a sketchbook or trying a little bit of the thing you think you might want to do a challenge around is a good predecessor to creating the challenge, because we don't want to do cart before horse, right? We don't want eyes bigger than stomach.
Except that's how we all operate.
And we're telling you this from experience of like, you can do that and we should all learn from experience. But let's say this is a skill you've been dabbling in, like me with acrylic inks. I really only did it for a weekend at this point. And I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like this. I would love to find a way to practice this weekly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important when it comes to creating your own brief to really hone in on what is the creative skill I'm trying to work on, like whether it's figure drawing, whether it's acrylic ink, whether it's curating outfits, right?
Yeah, I think even taking a step back and figuring out not just what skill we're trying to hone in, but what's the goal? Is the goal to hone in on a skill, or is it to gain some insight? Is it to take some of your own time back and make creative work for yourself? Because understanding the goal, like a lot of the challenges we do, of course, are going to be to hone a creative skill, but it could be broader than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you have a fair way to evaluate it at the end. So you're not beating yourself up of like, why am I not like a master level painter by the end of this challenge?
Yeah, I can like a more specific example, I guess, because I'm thinking of like, okay, I want to do a style challenge so that I can play more, get dressed every day. I want to understand what I feel good in. And I want to take inventory of the clothes that are in my closet. So that's not me necessarily like honing in on a skill as far as getting dressed. It's more like utilizing what I have. So maybe in terms of like a creative, like a artistic practice, creative challenge, and a comparable comparison. A comparison would be a comparison would be like, I have acrylic paints, I have colored pencils, I have oil pastels, I have clay, I have this. I have all these things that I haven't touched in over a year. I want to do each of those for a week and make the same thing so that I can figure out which ones of these are actually fun for me and which ones can I get rid of. So the goal of that is like figuring out what's fun, not necessarily improving a technical skill or like what art supplies can I donate to the arts and scrap store.
Okay, I see. I've been approaching this from a more like professional lens,
sure.
But that's also just the realm I operate in.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
and mine is play.
It's good to have both of these perspectives of you can have a challenge where, let's say, in your case, it's like, okay, I want to, like, what is my goal? The goal could be to get client work for lettering or to get client to like improve your illustration skills specifically targeted at like editorial clients. That's one thing coming from the agency world. When you actually get a brief, oftentimes there is a goal, right, that you're trying, and then like an audience you're actually trying to market this to, or if there is someone at the end of the day you're trying to serve. And so is this geared towards anyone besides yourself? Because if it is for personal fulfillment or exploration, that's cool. That is the outcome you're looking for. But if, let's say, you're like, I really love to get paid to design a book cover someday, then that helps you orient in a certain direction of like, okay, don't lose sight of these book covers should have some commercial appeal.
Exactly. So like setting the goal, I think, is before like, what skill do you want to own? Like the goal is, I want to do a challenge to improve my technical skill to get client work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Versus
totally.
I want to go through my art supply closet to figure out which things light me up so that I can clear space in my home or studio. You know?
I think there's multiple inroads. Like, you might want to create a challenge where it's like, okay, I want to use what's like already in my studio. I've seen artists around, I don't know, spring cleaning time talk about like no new supplies till I clean out my studio supplies. And you could set a challenge where you're like, I'm just gonna create projects with the different materials. It can be your inroad is the materials. Your inroad could be a topic that you're like romance novels, right? You're like, I love romance novels and I just want to do something that's creative and fun. And then your inroad is, how can I spend more time thinking about romance novels and like integrating that into my art?
I think I need to spend less time thinking about romance novels. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Or it can be like, I want to get a book cover client, so I'm going to do book cover challenges.
Yes. Yeah. And then that will dictate. I mean, you can use any mediums to do these things, but figuring out that and then figuring out, well, like what we said at the beginning, how much time do you have? Like, what is the window?
Yeah.
So for me, I just, I went to culinary school recently, and that was a year. And that's one of the bigger, I'd say, commitments in terms of like time.
Mm-hmm.
For coming up with your own prompt or your own challenge. You might want to say, like, you hopefully take a beat to think about what works for you. For me, I like a tighter timeline because it actually forces me to get stuff done.
Yeah.
You might want to say, hey, I am like currently in between jobs, so I have a ton of time. You could do a daily challenge, but if you're working full time, a daily challenge just might not be realistic for you. So you might want to do a weekly challenge or like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then give yourself the weekend off. It can be whatever, again, is realistic for you, and then figure out for how long of a period of time you want to do that for. I think a week, a month, however long feels appropriate. Like in the design industry, there was the 100-day project where people would do one piece per day for 100 days, but most people would just front load it and like make 100 pieces and drip them out, which makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
There's 36 days of type, which is all the letters and the numbers, I believe, just 36 days in a row. So whatever works for you. For me, if I'm publishing something, which I typically like to share whatever the end product of my challenge is in real time because it keeps me accountable. I don't know how you feel
agreed.
about that, but I also think it's helpful in figuring out, it's a good way to test out what people respond to with your work and creativity too.
Yeah.
Because you never know if you are, let's say, curious about taking any of your creative skills into a professional realm, you do need some audience feedback just to kind of figure out where you might fit and where there might be opportunities to provide services or product.
I also think that as far as the accountability thing goes, posting live, or it doesn't even have to be that you're posting on the internet, but that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it could be just like, doing a live blog entry or posting on your Notion page.
Documenting it somewhere, I think, is important. Even if it's just you do one, let's say, watercolor painting a day and you just tape it up to your wall so you can see the collection you've amassed.
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes it's easy to feel a little bit like adrift at sea when it comes to your creative output. But when you see them all, like literally like a gallery in a museum, or it can be a helpful reminder of like, oh yeah, I made all those things and let's look at them as a body of work versus individual pieces.
Yep. And that's what I talked about because I sent out email for people to do the creative play with May when I did the self-portrait challenge. And that's what I talked about. Like, okay, if I can commit to doing this for 30 days, I will have 30 self-portraits.
Yeah.
That is a collection of work, like a body of work in itself. And I have been interested in, and I know you've heard me talk about this, like learning more about what it takes to have a solo art show. And so that was just me kind of like noodling on like, okay, I'm going to start building bodies of work. But for the posting or however you're documenting it, I think doing it live can also help you recognize how easy it is to not prioritize it. Like I'm thinking specifically of the style challenges. When I have gone on, like traveled or gone on vacation or something for a time period during the style challenges, Lauren's about to eat her tiny banana.
I realized that it was just sitting in between us this whole time.
It's kind of a fun prop. It's just so tiny. It's like 2 bites. So I know that I went to New York one of the times that I was hosting a style challenge. And so I very specifically had to pack things that fit into those categories for my trip. And it helped because it gave me a container to pack in. And so now I always am thinking like, what are my color schemes for when I pack? Because it helps me approach packing a little bit more intentionally than just like, I want to bring everything. But also, it helps us recognize how easy it is to let that practice slip when something is out of routine. Like if I were doing a self-portrait drawing challenge that I was excited about, and then I was going on vacation, I might be like, well, I'll just do it when I get back. And then I stopped doing that practice. And I think it can give us insight into where we're not prioritizing our creative practice, because it's easy to let that fall away.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because there aren't any like immediate consequences for letting it slip.
Except letting yourself down in the long run, right? Like we have to commit to play. We have to commit to our creative practice, to honing our skill, to trying new things, to figuring out our creative voice and vision. And the only way to do that is to make work, and whatever creative work that is, whether it's outfits or whatever. But to commit to doing it, and these challenges help us kind of bump it up in the priority list.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Kristle and I just went to go see a panel of poets at the Palestinian Festival of Literature.
Cool.
And someone on stage said something about how theory is like discovered through practice. And so you can have all your ideas of like what you might want to, what you're going to like, what you want to do, what direction you want to go in. But until you actually put in the reps, you won't actually be standing firm in that theory. Like the theory is solidified by the practice, you know?
Wow. Love that.
Yeah, I know.
It seems so obvious, but yeah.
It's so tough to get stuck in your head, I think, because especially, sorry, I just put my tiny banana peel down. And do you also love that you said it was 2 bites and I've taken like 6?
Just a little nibble.
Mm-hmm.
Not me. I hork my food down.
But yeah, I think it is important to commit yourself to a practice, to not beat yourself up if you miss a little bit, but if you can get ahead of it and not fall behind, I think it's a nice vouch of confidence in yourself and saying, hey, I'm going to prioritize this thing. This thing matters.
This thing matters to me.
Yeah. When you use the metaphor or analogy of packing for a trip, I think that's actually a really great way to think about a challenge or a passion project, because you are figuring out, hey, how do I pack for this specific trip? Of what clothes am I going to bring for a 10-day trip versus a 20-day trip?
Yeah.
How big of a suitcase am I going to bring? Like you're using a lot of the same thinking as you would to give yourself a prompt for a creative project.
Yeah. What kind of weather? What activities am I doing?
Yeah.
Like
you're
thinking
taking
through
into
all these
consideration.
parameters.
Yeah. And only you know your situation. And so you have to learn how to give yourself briefs or prompts that are going to be conducive to getting you where you want to go and also are feasible with your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think one of the packing tips from a actual travel standpoint that I always found interesting from you is you will only ever bring 1 pair of shoes, which is great. It makes it so much easier to then pack all the other fun stuff when you're like, I'm a 1 pair of shoes kind of gal.
It does. And like that is a hot take to some people. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to only take 1 pair of shoes. I'm saying this is one thing that I can feel comfortable. That's one guardrail that I set for myself. And it has worked out. Sometimes it's 2, and that's fine. But for other people, maybe it's I'm only bringing 1 pair of pants and I wear the same pants every day. Mm-hmm. That's okay. That's just, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, it's figuring out your own priorities. And I think you can do that through challenges because once you come up with a little container for yourself, you will discover a lot. And you'll get to test out some of the theories that you had about, I think I'm going to like this. I think this is the direction I want to take my creativity in. But halfway through, 3 days in, who knows? You might be like, not quite for me. Maybe I'll pivot in this direction. You can kind of work within.
Maybe I need to buy another pair of shoes while I'm there.
Exactly. You can kind of work within the parameters you've set for yourself. But I think it's a skill, learning how to brief yourself.
Yeah.
And to give yourself some guidelines for a project. Like this acrylic ink stuff that I'm doing, I don't really have any container yet because I was doing my dabbling this weekend, but maybe I will. It would be helpful to me to come up with, I'm going to do 1 of these per week and it's going to be on this theme, picking a general topic. For me, it helps to alleviate any of the like blank page, like deer in the headlights that you can feel.
Yeah.
And if you are stuck in a period of inertia where you're like, I haven't made anything in a while and now I'm overthinking what I should make, because inertia is really powerful and to like jump back in there can feel tough. Grab whatever is easily available to you, like make it easy for yourself to get back in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Should we switch into doing some of the prompts? Because now I'm just like really noodling on a lot of them.
Okay, so what we wanted to do, we thought it'd be fun to do a rapid fire. Like one of us will say, give an example scenario of like, I want to do this and work on this goal or this medium, like, and then the other person can brainstorm potential challenges just to give you a jumping off point of like how you can start thinking about your own either serious or silly, big, small, whatever it might be, challenges for yourself.
Yeah, we'll try to give examples of everything. I have one ready to go.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Let's do it.
Okay. Okay. Lauren, dear Hom Sweet Hom, I want to, I don't know why I'm making this like this scenario is me. All of a sudden it's just like I'm writing to you like a column, like a columnist. I want to work on having an understanding of a color palette that is specifically me so that my portfolio has a cohesive color palette. What kind of challenge could I do for 30 days?
A 30-day challenge to figure out what your color palette is? I would say to pick, since the color palette, the discovery of the color palette is the important part and the variable part, I would make sure some of the other elements are kind of like fixed. So there are fewer things for you to have to think about so you can focus on your goal of the color palette. So it might be something like, okay, I'm going to create one simple illustration of a cat every single day, and I'm going to use a different color palette every single day. Different cat illustration, but it's always going to be a cat, and the colors will change. So keeping some variables fixed helps to not get lost in oh, what should it be when I sit down to do the illustration? You know what it's going to be. Or if you're like, oh, I don't know, 30 cats doesn't really feel like me, you can broaden it a little bit and say like, it's going to be a pet. Like it's going to be.
Sure.
I was going to say animal, but animal is even really broad. You have the whole animal kingdom to choose from.
Yeah.
So maybe you choose just like a genre of animals.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be 30 days of different colored felines. It doesn't even have to be a house cat. Great. Or maybe it's going to be 30 days of different colored fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
It can be, give yourself a container that feels like you have enough wiggle room, but it's not going to let you go dilly-dally.
Yeah. I love that. That's great.
That was my knee-jerk answer.
Okay. I love it. And I think it's fun because I think you and I are going to have very different knee-jerk answers.
Ooh, I also have a addendum to that last point.
Okay.
I would give myself a limitation for the number of colors per palette. So it's like, I'm always going to work with a 5-color color palette. Because, again, giving yourself some parameters, it'll help you to come up with color palettes that are minimal enough, but like have enough of a breath where you're like, okay, this feels like me, this doesn't feel like me. Because if you just choose like 2 colors, that might be a little limiting for your illustration. But if you choose, I don't know, 5, you'll start to, through practice, orient yourself towards like, oh, I'm actually really feeling these like cooler tones, or like, this warm color palette just wasn't working for me. And you will eventually land on colors that align with you.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Okay, fun. Thank you so much.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to say, what if I am a home cook who really wants to get better at baking bread? What is a challenge you could come up with for me?
Oh, wow.
And I want this to be over the course of the winter since it's cold now. So I have a longer runway, 3 months.
3 months. Okay. Oh, to take your advice from the last, why are you giving me the food ones? You think I know how bread works?
Oh, shoot. Okay. What about?
No, I'm going to answer. I'm going to try. And then you can make an addendum to my answer. Okay.
Cookie Cookies. You know how to make cookies.
Yeah. No, I want to answer
Okay.
the bread one because I think it's fun for me not knowing. I assume that we'll have to choose some parameters. So I think you should pick a different bread type for each month. So 1 month you're going to do sourdough because you probably have a starter. It's going. You can tweak different things, and that one feels like it's easiest because I feel like a lot of like people who are easing into bread making start with sourdough. No? Okay. Quick yeasty.
Yeast is
okay.
a little more accessible.
Well, you're above yeast. You're interested in refining your bread skill. So we're moving beyond yeast.
Yeah, this is not beginning baking. This is refining.
Yes, this is
trying
refining.
to be a better bread baker.
Yes. So I think you're gonna choose a different type of bread for each month. That's number one. And then for each week, you make the same thing with different tweaks. So maybe you're changing the type of flour. Maybe you're changing the temperature. I don't know. I like breaking it down by week, giving yourself like the same goal for each day of the week. So that you can have a like you're doing this broader challenge, but each week is focused on a specific parameter that you're changing.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what you do with your style challenge, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell me.
I'm so sorry. I gave you such a bad question.
It's okay.
Why don't I? Hold on.
You answer that question.
Let me give you one that is more into real. I don't know why. I was like, I'll ask her one that's related to me.
It's okay.
Okay. I was going to say, let's say I am someone who has been following a lot of people online, and quilting seems like something I'd like to get into. I've never quilted before. What is a challenge I could start with to not overwhelm myself, but get better with quilting? I have a 9-to-5 job, no kids. And so I've got, let's say, 2 nights a week to dedicate to a quilting thing.
I love this.
What would you recommend for a never quilted before person?
Okay, perfect. This is a much better question for me because I already have an answer. Okay.
Cool.
So quilting there are a lot of different steps. Figuring out your fabric, cutting the fabric, attaching the fabric, ironing. There are a lot of like separate steps that make it really easy for you to very slowly over time build a quilt. And I would recommend for someone that's starting to focus on like rectangular shapes, but building a quilt block and trying to do a block or 2 each week. So you could find a quilt block pattern. It could be as easy as like a checkerboard pattern, but all quilts are built from like smaller blocks, and then you build bigger, and then maybe you have like 5, and then you sew them together, and that's your row, and then you do 5 more blocks. So you can experiment with getting really nice seam allowances, or if you're like me and you don't really care about that, you'll start to find through like very simple block building the things that like spark your interest in quilting and the things that you don't care as much about. But I think if you only have 2 nights a week, a couple hours maybe a week, once you choose your pattern and your fabric, you would be able to do your cutting and then assemble like 1 block and then iron it and then maybe assemble another one in a night. Like it's a pretty streamlined process. So I think doing maybe a different quilt block each week would be a fun challenge to like get more into quilting. You could try different quilt block patterns to see what you like. Yeah, I think having a couple nights a week quilting is totally doable, assuming that you have a sewing machine. Even if you've never quilted before, if you have access to a sewing machine, quilting is just straight lines. Like it's very straightforward.
I thought you were going to say pot holders.
Oh, pot holders are kind of hard actually because
to me as a novice, I'm like, they're small.
They are mini quilts.
Yeah.
But in my head, that needs to be so much more precise than a quilt does.
Yeah.
Even though that's not true. Like it can be imperfect. But yeah, a pot holder is a mini quilt or a placemat.
I think with beginner if you're a beginner and you want to give yourself a challenge, the goal has to be to just practice the skill. Like you can't set like, I'm going to make a quilt that is giftable to like my mother-in-law. Because you might be setting the bar a little too high and then you will beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having a couple projects at the beginning of learning any new skill and giving yourself a lot of leeway to make something wonky.
I think like even like for this like hypothetical I'm interested in quilting challenge, I don't even think it needs to turn into a quilt. I think just making the blocks to try, I'm making an amendment as we go. Trying a different quilt block every week gives you an introduction into like piecing colors together, into piecing different pattern shapes together. And then you get to figure out like, oh, I really like making these stars. Like I think I mentioned that in a previous episode. Like I figured out how to make a star. I could have followed a pattern, but I like just figuring it out myself.
And you were drawn to that shape before.
Yeah. Yep. And so there are a lot of classic shapes. And I feel like that would be a really fun way to try quilting and see if you can kind of get the gears turning in your brain of like, ooh, I'm really enjoying sort of the assembly line process of like a checkerboard quilt, or I really like the intricacies of paper piecing, which are it's the processes for different quilt blocks are a lot different.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me a different question.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So next one for you. I am a ceramic artist. And I'm interested in photographing my work to use, like I'm multifaceted because I'm a chaotic creative. I like using my ceramic pieces in my graphic design work, and I want to get more client-based work that incorporates my clay and my design. So kind of how you like incorporate food into your work, I want to incorporate clay. What could I do to build a portfolio?
Ooh.
Is that too broad? That's like
you want to bring your ceramics into your design work, or you want to bring design into ceramics?
Ceramics into design.
Ceramics into design. Ooh.
So like maybe I'm designing a book cover that has ceramic letters as the cover.
Ah, I see.
Can you tell that I'm like, what do graphic designers do?
No, so this is the only reason I'm struggling is because I actually can't pull any mental examples of this. But I've seen, let's say, people who do more like artisan, like craft things. Like, let's say, if you were taking a ceramics class and then you were like, I want to bring this into my design. I've seen people who do like needlepoint or embroidery who then start to create like design treatments, but like incorporate some stitching into it. With ceramics, it's tough because you do have to photograph it, but I suppose that's the same thing with food that I'm doing now. I would honestly just give yourself a brief of do your best guess as to where do you see this fitting into your design work? Is it the typography? Like, is it like a background for something? Is it in your photo styling for something? And try to look for examples of maybe, even if it's not the same thing as ceramics, like, are there other ways that people have brought physical objects into design? Where is this work being commissioned? That could give you an idea of where to orient yourself, whether it is something like editorial design, or maybe you see it being used in like advertising, or you just make up your own stuff. I think that you could just create book covers are interesting. You could basically just choose some kind of commercial format, even if it was just an Instagram series of like, I'm going to maybe reimagine some of my existing designs even as ceramic pieces. I'm going to take 5 of my favorite designs that I've done and make them out of clay. That could be kind of cool.
That's fun.
I'm trying to think of like a lower effort lift of, because I know how much work ceramics is. And that is something I always tell my students of, when we say the word passion project, we start to think of all the possibilities because it's passion. But you have to be realistic about if each piece is going to take you 40 hours, you need to give yourself grace when it takes you a month to complete a piece if you have a full-time job already.
Yeah.
And so I always try to do like smaller versions so I can create bigger, like a wider body of work. So for something like a challenge where you're like, okay, maybe I'm going to create, maybe they were even just like, you choose one ceramic form and then one design application. Like I'm going to create a little figurine out of ceramics and then illustrate on my iPad, like around it or something like that. I think this is also vague. I'm so sorry.
No, it was a very weird and specific prompt. I think that makes sense. Like you just have to really envision if you're wanting to get commercial work out of this, like how would this apply?
Yeah, and if you can't even, like there are so many inroads. Sometimes you just have so much inspiration and conviction that you're like, I'm just going to do this thing and see if anyone bites. That is valid too. If you know you want to get commercial work out of it, let's say you're already a working artist and you're like, I'd love to see if someone would pay for these things, then it makes sense to do a little bit of like research to just take your best stab at getting it in front of the right people. But there are plenty of times where people just like make a thing and then it gets put on the internet and then companies want to commission it. So I've seen it work both ways before. I was just thinking about this one account that I follow. Do you follow Symmetry Breakfast? This guy just used to cook breakfast for him and his husband every morning and would just plate both breakfasts like as if they were symmetrical, like mirrored images of each other. And people loved that. And so I always bring that up as a reference with my students because I think he ended up getting a book deal. Like it's like the things organized neatly. People just like, like graphic porn. You're just like, oh, that looks so nice.
Yeah.
And so I think just coming up with a format even for your ceramic design pieces, just a consistent format is the bare minimum. And for anything that you do, like you were saying with the quilting different squares, like is that what they are?
Yeah.
Patches, squares? Blocks.
Yeah.
Blocks, yes. Like then you can have a whole wall or like table full of these different blocks that you've made. And you can, similar to if anyone went to art school or you've ever been in any kind of creative class where you do a critique at the end, it's so nice to, in a group, look at a body of work or to look at a piece of work and to be able to then have dialogue about it. When you're working on your own, you kind of have to do that for yourself where you lay out all your work and you do take a step back and you go, oh, what am I gravitating towards? What parts did I like? What parts did I not like? Do I see, now that I see in full view all the things I made, are there any natural through lines in my work that I wasn't cognizant of when I was making it? But now that I step back, I can see, oh, I actually really love the like handles that I put on my mugs, or I really love the pointier shapes in my quilting blocks, or I really liked this part. Then you can distill those down into your next project and you're basically refining your vision and getting closer to finding your voice, quote unquote.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, just like the whole theme is always reflection, right? You have to do it, whether it's how you're feeling about Instagram, like we talked about in the last episode, or how you're feeling about the work that you just created. Like taking time to look at it or sit with it and reflect and refine. That's life, baby.
Okay, I was going to give you one, but I think we're coming up on time.
That's fine. I feel like we really gave each other like chaotic. The quilt one was not chaotic, but the ones I gave you, I feel like were a little bit chaotic. But I think some like rapid fire examples that we could do, you know, like the style challenges that I've done, like monochrome outfits for a week, or pattern mixing, or all thrifted. maybe do you have like some food-based ones that you could rapid fire? I'm just trying to like actually give people some actionable ones instead of those specific examples.
Like tiny little challenges?
Yeah.
I
really put you on the spot. I'm sorry. I can keep going. I feel like
it's tough because like maybe we should have talked about this before we started recording. I can only come at this with a professional lens because I don't do challenges personally.
Right. That's fair. That's fair.
So please keep firing them off.
Yeah. I mean, I think like if we were to use cooking as an example, like, oh, I want to incorporate more vegetables into my meals. Like, how can I create a sauce this week that has 2 more herbs in it, you know, or I want to use like 3 different color vegetables in every meal, like giving yourself just little challenges. I have to trick myself into eating vegetables like a child. So I'm like, oh, did I have 3 today? Maybe if there's an orange one and a green one, I'll be more excited. So doing that, or like drawing a cat every day, or I think using a challenge to just sort of build up the habit is one thing that I really advocate for people who are working to prioritize more play and more creativity into their life. Like, you don't need a lot of time. Yes, if you're trying to build a portfolio to get professional work, absolutely you should devote more time to it. But if you're just trying to better your skill or find more time for creativity, can you do a 5-minute doodle every day? Or can you cut out letters from a magazine once a week and then at the end of the month make 1 collage? Like,
I see. Like bite-sized things to build habits. Like it could be something like, okay, I'm going to draw a 15-minute like still life of my coffee or breakfast every morning.
Yes.
And I'm
going to take a picture of my breakfast in the mirrored image like every day. Yeah. I'm going to take a picture of my cat waiting for its food every morning. You know, like it can be little silly things, but it's about being intentional with like, how can I make my life more creative, you know, or more playful? So 2 different approaches to challenges, to challenges,
yes,
which can include style challenges.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. This entire episode is basically giving you some ways to think about coming up with prompts for yourself. I think oftentimes, whether you're a professional or a hobbyist, it's easy to look for other people's challenges, or other people's other people's challenges to join into, which is great. But I do think it's like a next level skill and something that's helpful to hone at any stage in your creative practice, to learn how to give yourself those challenges or those briefs, because then through that you'll get more done than just being like, what do I want to make this weekend? And you have no like way to orient yourself. This happens to me all the time still. And so giving myself some parameters just helps me sit down and actually put pen to paper, or like make small steps towards the thing I say I want to improve.
Yeah, it just helps giving yourself the path to take action, which is something that we've talked about a lot. It's just like, okay, I have all these ideas. I'm excited about all these things. We're all chaotic creatives listening and speaking. And we need to kind of understand what tools will help us actually create the work and get it out in the world, whether it's just for play and personal fulfillment, or if it's for building your creative career.
Yeah, and it helps keep you in tune with what you want and need right now. Yeah. That's like the ultimate question, is like, what do I want to make? And then
what's inspiring me right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
What can I learn from this?
Yay.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're wrapping up episode 10 of season 2.
Thank you for joining us for season 2. That's what I was going to say. The fact that this podcast is a challenge in itself, we gave ourselves, when you first approached me being like, do you want to do a podcast? I was like, yes, we committed to doing 10 episodes and then evaluating to see if we wanted to do more.
Yeah.
So we gave ourselves a container with this podcast.
Yeah.
So I think that's the ultimate example of, okay, let's try this thing out, like low commitment, like we don't have a lot of skin in the game. It's just going to be an experiment. Yep. I think you got to approach it as an experiment. and then see what the results are.
Yeah, I think the experimental lens is really important for a lot of at least my challenges, because it's like, what can I learn from this? How can I refine how I'm living my life, how I'm spending my time, what my creative processes are? And when we get too focused on the outcome, like maybe, okay, I want to do a style challenge so that I have a really clear understanding of my personal style, and then I don't because the prompts weren't quite right for me, then I'm frustrated. So it's like, it has to be experimental. Figure out what resonates with you and like ditch whatever doesn't resonate with you. Change the prompts of the challenge if you're 2 months in and you're like, I hate this, or 2 days in. Maybe give it more than 2 days.
We chose a number of episodes and a theme.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Fun.
If we can do it, so can you.
So can you. Yes, you can. I'm gonna do a plug for leaving us a rating and review.
Ooh, we would love that.
We would love that. And maybe season 3 is the season that we open up a Patreon.
That would be cool.
Yeah. We would love to be able to like give you more, and also, I don't know, more access to some of the like ramblings that are behind the scene. I know we ramble. I ramble. You don't. You're very concise and clear in your language. But yeah, leave us a rating and review and we'll noodle on some stuff for season 3.
Yeah, we're going to be reassessing, reevaluating, figuring out what direction we want to take this in. It's just forever iterating on something.
Yeah. What our guardrails and container are.
Ultimately, it's fun for us to do, which means we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah. That's the goal. We're having fun. Seems like you're having fun listening to us, and we appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. See you in season 3.
Yay!
Bye.